The galaxy had once been a vast expanse of wonder where humans lived among the stars, exploring new worlds, making alliances with alien species, and expanding their civilization across the cosmos. Earth was a jewel among them, a thriving planet at the heart of humanity's achievements. But all that had changed when the Kralnar arrived, their ships black as night blotted out the stars like shadows creeping across the heavens. The first warning came in the form of broken transmissions and faint signals from the outer colonies, each more desperate than the last, and then silence. In mere weeks, the Kralnar unleashed their wrath upon the colonies, one by one, destroying entire worlds with unimaginable force. Their weapons were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, capable of tearing through fleets and fortresses as if they were mere paper. The people of Earth watched helplessly as their neighbors fell to the unrelenting tide, and knew deep in their hearts that they would be next. Earth was all that remained. In the heart of the United Earth Defense Command, the leaders gathered around a holographic table, their faces grim as they studied the reports. The fleets had been decimated, the colonies erased, and now the Kralnar were heading directly for Earth, no longer hidden in the dark corners of the galaxy, but marching toward the last hope of humanity. Admiral Calverin stood at the head of the table, his mind racing through the options, each more desperate than the last. He had led the Earth fleet for decades, had commanded them through skirmishes with pirates and border conflicts. But this was something else entirely. This was not a war. This was extinction. The Kralnar had no mercy, no hesitation. They simply destroyed and moved on, leaving nothing in their wake. His gaze hardened as he turned to his council, his voice low but firm. "We cannot defeat them with our current forces. We need something more, something they don't expect." The room fell silent as the others exchanged glances before turning back to Verin. It was clear to everyone that humanity's conventional methods were useless against an enemy this powerful. They needed to think beyond strategy, beyond tactics. They needed a weapon that could tip the balance in their favor. Verin's eyes narrowed as an idea began to take shape in his mind, and with it came a revelation, the theory long considered unthinkable and buried in the archives of the military's most secret divisions. A hidden alliance long dormant, buried beneath the surface of Mars, existed the ancient race known as the Azra. They had once been powerful allies of humanity long ago, but had vanished without a trace, almost as if they had never existed. The archives were clear, though, in their final records. The Azra had left something behind, something that might just be able to challenge the Kralnar. In the depths of Mars, beneath miles of rock and forgotten ruins, were weapons ancient and powerful, and humanity had no choice but to awaken them if they were to stand a chance. Verin knew the risk was enormous. He knew that exploring the ruins would be dangerous and potentially deadly, but there was no time left to hesitate. The Kralnar were coming, and humanity had only one chance to survive. As the holograms flickered and the room buzzed with the urgent discussion of the plan, Verin stood at the window, looking out over the Earth. Below, the stars had once been a symbol of hope and opportunity, but now they felt like a vast, cold emptiness. A shadow had fallen over them, and only those brave enough to fight would have any chance of reclaiming them for the future of humanity. The days after the meeting passed in a blur as Earth's leadership scrambled to put Verin's plan into motion. The stakes had never been higher, and every action seemed to carry the weight of the galaxy upon it. As the search for the ancient Azra weapons on Mars began, the rest of humanity's military forces were left in a perilous state, unable to defend against the overwhelming Kralnar fleet that was drawing closer with every passing moment. Earth's final defenses were barely enough to hold their own in the face of certain annihilation. While the Earth Defense Force prepared for the inevitable, the whispers of dissent began to spread beneath the surface. Some of the higher-ranking officers and key politicians began to question the wisdom of Verin's plan. It wasn't just the risks of waking the ancient Azra, but the deeper question of why they had vanished in the first place. What if the Azra were not allies, but something worse than the Kralnar themselves? What if they had left behind something that would only bring about humanity's own downfall? It was in the midst of these growing tensions that a dark truth emerged. The Galactic Council had been secretly communicating with the Kralnar. The long-established alliance between humanity and the Council was nothing more than a facade, and Earth had been left in the dark. The very beings the Earth had relied on for years were no more trustworthy than the invaders they had fought so hard to resist. It started with a small leak, a piece of intercepted communication meant for the Kralnar fleet. It was encrypted, but with the help of Earth's best cryptographers. The message was decrypted, revealing a shocking plot. The Council had been feeding the Kralnar intelligence about Earth's defenses, sending them schematics of military bases and critical infrastructure in exchange for promises of power. Once humanity was wiped out, the Council's leaders believed that the Kralnar's superiority would ensure the destruction of Earth, leaving them free to divide the spoils of the galaxy between themselves. The betrayal hit like a knife to the heart. The very beings Earth had considered allies were actively conspiring to bring about their destruction. In that moment, Admiral Varen knew that the battle was not only against the Kralnar, but now against those who had once stood beside them. The Council's betrayal was the catalyst for a new kind of war, a war not just for survival, but for the soul of humanity itself. With this knowledge, Varen moved quickly to secure the truth and expose the traitors within Earth's ranks. At first, the task seemed impossible. There were those in the military who still believed in the Council's vision, and those who feared the consequences of breaking ties. But Varen knew that nothing would be left if they didn't act swiftly and decisively. A covert task force led by Captain Ilara Juno, a trusted officer of the Earth Defense Force, was dispatched to infiltrate the highest levels of the Council's inner circle. They would uncover the full extent of the betrayal and, if necessary, eliminate the traitors before they could do further harm to Earth's survival. But as Juno's team moved closer to the truth, they realized that the conspiracy ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. The truth was far more insidious than mere political maneuvering. The Kralnar had promised the Council something beyond power. They had offered them immortality, a chance to transcend flesh, and join a cosmic order far beyond anything humanity could comprehend. The Council's allegiance was no mere betrayal. It was a twisted promise that could doom the galaxy. Varen had no choice but to confront the Council directly in a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of their power and place Earth's final hope at risk. The time for subtlety had passed, and now the galaxy would see the true cost of betrayal. With the truth of the Galactic Council's betrayal now exposed, the Earth Defense Force was thrown into turmoil. It was clear that the Council could no longer be trusted, and that humanity's future lay not in diplomacy, but in self-reliance. Admiral Varen knew that there was little time left before the Kralnar would arrive in full force. Earth's fleet had been decimated. The colonies were gone. And now the very fabric of their alliances had been shattered. Humanity was alone, and only a radical solution could save them. The decision was made to press forward with the plan to unlock the ancient weapons of the Azra hidden beneath Mars' surface. A team of the best minds and soldiers were assembled to retrieve the artifacts and activate the dormant technology. Despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, there was no other option. If the Azra had once been powerful enough to challenge the Kralnar, then their weapons could be the key to Earth's survival. The team was led by Captain Ilara Juno, who had proven herself not only as a skilled tactician, but as one of the few people Varen trusted completely. Her team, the Starbound, was made up of the most elite soldiers Earth had ever produced. These warriors had undergone grueling training and were enhanced with cutting-edge technologies. Implants designed to improve reflexes, physical strength, and even their mental capabilities. But it was their discipline, their unyielding loyalty to Earth and each other, that made them humanity's last hope. As the Starbound descended into the Mars caverns, they encountered the first of many obstacles. The entrance to the ancient Azra complex was hidden deep within a mountain range, protected by a series of deadly traps designed to deter any would-be explorers. It took all of Juno's training and the collective expertise of her team to navigate the deadly defenses, each more ingenious and perilous than the last. Yet as they ventured deeper into the heart of Mars, they began to uncover clues about the Azra's past. The walls of the underground complex were covered in murals that depicted a civilization once far more advanced than anything humanity had achieved, but also haunted by a tragic downfall, a catastrophic war with the Kralnar. It seemed had driven them into seclusion, and the artifacts they left behind were both a gift and a warning. Juno's team pressed on, each step forward revealing more of the Azarist final days. Their discoveries led them to an enormous chamber buried deep beneath the surface, its walls lined with strange glowing panels and cryptic symbols. As the team set to work deciphering the technology, they realized that the Azra's weapons were not just physical but psychological, tools that could manipulate minds and turn the tide of entire battles by breaking an enemy's will to fight. But there was a catch. The technology had a dangerous side effect. It was not a tool that could be wielded lightly. It was capable of incredible destruction, yes, but it also carried the potential to corrupt those who used it, turning them into something unrecognizable, something less human. Juno was faced with an agonizing choice: to activate the weapons and risk losing her team to the destructive power of the Azarist technology, or to abandon the mission and leave humanity defenseless. It was a decision that would change everything. With the Kralnar looming ever closer, Juno and her team knew that there was no turning back. The only way to ensure the survival of Earth was to awaken the power of the Azra, no matter the cost. The moment the artifact was activated, a low hum filled the cavern, and the walls seemed to pulse with energy. The Starborn stood in stunned silence as the ancient Azra technology began to resonate with a force that shook the very ground beneath their feet. And then, as the chamber lights flickered and the ground trembled beneath them, they heard it, a voice ancient, cold, and filled with both warning and promise. "We are the Azra, and we will never be your salvation." The Starborn knew then that the real battle was just beginning. The voice echoed through the chamber, and for a long moment, the Starborn stood frozen, each of them processing the chilling words that had come from the depths of the Azra's ancient technology. They had awakened something far more than just a weapon, something sentient, and beyond their understanding. The hum of the cavern intensified, and the walls flickered with a strange, ethereal light as the power from the artifact surged. Captain Ilara. Juno's heart pounded as the eerie voice continued, its tone both commanding and filled with disdain. "We gave you the gift of power long ago, and now you seek to claim it as your own. But be warned, humans, such power comes with a price." Juno felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The Starborn were trained to face the unknown, to fight through fear and uncertainty, but nothing in their preparation had prepared them for this. They had expected weapons, tools to help them defend Earth, not an alien consciousness bound to the very core of the technology. They had hoped for an ally, but what they had found seemed more like a curse. The voice continued, its words seeping into their minds like a slow poison. "You are not worthy of the Azra's legacy. We gave you a chance to transcend, but you chose instead to destroy. You will not wield this power without consequence." Juno snapped back to reality, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She turned to her team, her voice low and urgent. "We need to get out of here, now. This isn't what we thought it was." But before she could give further orders, the chamber's lights flared brightly, blinding them. All the walls seemed to bend and twist, as if the very fabric of reality was warping around them. The ground shook violently, and the Starborn had to brace themselves against the tremors. Then, just as quickly as the chaos had begun, it stopped, leaving them standing in the stillness of the cavern. But something had changed. Something fundamental. The technology they had just activated was no longer passive. It was alive, and it had left its mark on each of them. A new voice, different from the first, emerged from the darkness of their minds, a whisper of temptation and power. "You will wield the power of the Azra, or you will die by it. Your minds belong to us now." Juno felt her pulse quicken as she realized what was happening. The team's enhancements, their implants, were beginning to flicker in response to the alien influence. The Azra technology had bonded with them on a molecular level, altering their neural pathways, their thoughts becoming entwined with the ancient consciousness. The more they resisted, the more the force of the connection pushed back. "We have to get out, and we have to take what we found with us," Juno said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her mind. The team nodded, but the battle was far from over. As they made their way back to the surface, the effects of the technology began to manifest more violently in some of the soldiers. Their thoughts became clouded, their movements erratic, and several of them began to fight against the very group they had sworn to protect Earth from. The bond with the Azra's power was more insidious than any of them had imagined. As they emerged from the caves, their mission felt like a failure. The technology that could save them had now become an alien force seeking to control their very wills. The Starborn, once humanity's last line of defense, were now at risk of becoming the weapon they feared. When Juno returned to the surface, she immediately transmitted a report to Admiral Varen, detailing the consequences of their mission. It was a revelation that shook the foundation of Earth's last hope. "Admiral," she said, her voice heavy with dread, "the Azra have left us with a choice. Wield their power and risk losing ourselves, or abandon it and face certain destruction. I don't know if we can fight both the Kraulinar and the Azra." Varen's reply was short, but the gravity of his words was clear. "We do what we must, Captain. There is no turning back now. But remember, the fight for Earth is not just a fight for survival. It's a fight for who we are." The true nature of the war had just begun, and the enemy was not only outside their walls, but now lurking within them as well. The weight of Juno's report hung heavy in the air as Earth's leadership digested the consequences of their discovery. The Azra's technology had not only given them a weapon to fight the Kraulinar, but also placed a dangerous influence over the Starborn soldiers themselves. The ancient power they had unearthed was not merely a tool of war, but a force capable of rewriting the very essence of human will and identity. Admiral Varen's decision was swift, but carried the burden of immense responsibility. The Earth Defense Force had no choice but to proceed with using the Azra technology. Time was running out, and the Kraulinar were getting closer every moment. Wasted meant another inch of their dominion over humanity's future. The forces of the Galactic Council had already been compromised, and now the Kraulinar were advancing toward Earth's last defenses. Yet there was a glimmer of hope within the darkness. The hidden relics beneath Mars were not merely weapons, but a reservoir of ancient knowledge, data, and schematics that could revolutionize human technology. But that knowledge came with a terrifying price. The Starborn soldiers were becoming more unstable with every passing hour. Their minds tugged in different directions as the Azra's will began to merge with their own. Despite the risks, Varen knew that he had no other choice. He was gambling with humanity's very soul, but survival demanded it. The team was now tasked with unlocking the rest of the Azra's hidden knowledge, which was buried in encrypted systems and sealed chambers that even the Azra themselves had abandoned long ago. The Starborn, though increasingly unpredictable, were the only ones who could interact with these ancient machines and interface with the technology. On Mars, deep within the remnants of the Azra's civilization, the team pressed forward despite the growing tension within their ranks. Juno could see the changes in her soldiers. Familiar faces were beginning to warp, their expressions distant, eyes flickering with an otherworldly glow as the Azra's influence took root deeper within them. The bond between the Starborn and the Azra's legacy was stronger than anyone had anticipated, and for some, the pull of the technology was becoming an addiction. Yet in the heart of the complex, something unexpected occurred. As they activated another dormant section of the Azra archives, a deep rumble vibrated through the cavern floor. It was as though the very core of the planet itself had stirred. The walls split open, revealing a chamber far larger and more advanced than anything they had seen before. At the center of the room stood a massive crystalline structure, glowing with an eerie blue light, and surrounded by thousands of data consoles, each buzzing with ancient power. "This is it," Juno muttered, her voice almost a whisper as she gazed at the holographic maps that began to form around them. "This is the heart of their knowledge." As the Starborn activated the central console, streams of data flooded the room, cascading down like waterfalls of information encoded in alien language. The systems lit up one by one, revealing technologies far beyond human understanding, shields capable of rendering entire fleets invisible, weapons that harnessed energy from stars themselves, and even methods to manipulate gravity. But there was something more, something far darker hidden deep within the data. It wasn't just about weapons or technology. There was an underlying current of manipulation, a plan that had been set in motion centuries before humanity had ever entered the galactic stage. The Azra had not simply fought the Kralnar. They had planned to use the Kralnar to reshape the entire galaxy, to bring all races under their control, and forge a new order where they, the Azra, were the undisputed rulers of all. Juno's hands trembled as she scanned the final encrypted message, the words forming slowly before her eyes. Use the power. Control the stars. Erase the weakness of flesh. It was clear now. The Azra had not been the benevolent allies they had hoped for. They were a race consumed by ambition and a lust for power, willing to use humanity as mere instruments in their twisted vision of galactic dominance. In that moment, Juno understood the terrible truth. The Azra had not simply left behind a weapon. They had left behind a plan to control everything and everyone. The choices ahead were no longer simple survival strategies. They were moral questions that would define what kind of future humanity would have. The ancient power now offered the Earth Defense Force a chance to conquer their enemies, but at what cost? Would humanity become like the Azra, wielding power at the cost of their humanity? Or could they use this knowledge to defeat the Kralnar and forge a new destiny for themselves? The path was uncertain, but the war had just entered a far darker stage than anyone had anticipated. The decision to activate the Azra's ancient power had been made, and with it, a grim resolve had settled over Earth's defenders, the soldiers of the Earth Defense Force. Once proud and determined, now found themselves walking a fine line between salvation and damnation. As the newly unlocked technologies began to integrate into their systems, the starborn soldiers felt the weight of their new reality. The power coursing through their veins was intoxicating, but it was also corrupting, distorting their thoughts, their emotions, and the very essence of their humanity. Captain Juno had become a living example of this conflict. Her mind was a battlefield, a constant struggle to maintain control over the invasive influence of the Azra's technology. With every new upgrade, her connection to the ancient power grew deeper, and the voices in her head, alien, cold, and calculating, whispered promises of power and dominance. She had become a weapon, but also a prisoner of her own creation. As the Kralnar fleet drew nearer, Earth's last hope began to look more like a curse than a salvation. The Starborn's enhancements were powerful beyond measure, capable of taking on entire Kralnar warships. But their minds were fraying under the strain. The technology that had been meant to save humanity now threatened to undo everything they had fought for. When the Kralnar at last arrived in Earth's orbit, they did so with terrifying force. Their fleet dwarfed anything humanity had ever encountered, a vast armada of ships that moved like a storm across the sky, blotting out the stars. The final battle for Earth had begun, but there was no guarantee humanity would survive. Admiral Varen watched from his command station as the Kralnar's ships launched their first wave of attacks. The bombardment was immediate, an overwhelming cascade of energy beams that tore through Earth's outer defenses like paper. The Earth Defense Force's remaining fleets were no match for the Kralnar's superior technology, and the fight was quickly slipping out of humanity's control. Juno, along with the Starborn, was dispatched to strike the heart of the Kralnar's fleet, to take down their flagship and buy Earth a few more hours of life. But the mission quickly became a nightmare as they entered enemy territory. The full extent of the Azra's power took hold, and the Starborn's once precise combat coordination began to unravel. Their systems were malfunctioning, their enhancements fighting against them, and their minds were no longer entirely their own. Some of the soldiers, overwhelmed by the alien influence, turned against their comrades, their eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. Juno struggled to maintain control. Her every command met with resistance from within her own soldiers. She could hear the whispers, Feel the pull of the Azra's consciousness urging her to push forward at any cost to destroy the Kralnar, to annihilate the invaders and claim the galaxy for humanity's rule, but in doing so, she knew she risked losing herself completely. The mission was turning into a massacre as the Starborn descended upon the Kralnar flagship. Their attacks became increasingly erratic, fueled by the Azra's whispers, but lacking the precision of their training. The Kralnar, sensing the chaos among their enemies, retaliated with brutal force, their ships encircling the Starborn with deadly efficiency. Juno's heart sank as she watched her team fall one by one, overwhelmed by the combined forces of the Kralnar and the destructive influence of the Azra's technology. She could barely hold her own as the power coursing through her began to warp her senses, clouding her judgment. In a final, desperate bid, Juno activated the ultimate weapon, the core of the Azra's power, a destructive energy capable of wiping out an entire fleet with a single strike. But as the weapon charged, Juno realized too late that she had lost control of it. The power within the weapon was no longer something she could wield. It had become something that wielded her. The last thing Juno saw before the chamber went dark was the face of Admiral Varen flashing across her comm screen. His voice was strained, filled with a mixture of determination and fear. "Captain Juno, you must stop it, please." But it was already too late. The weapon had already fired, and the shockwave tore through space, decimating everything in its path. Kralnar, Earth Defense Force, and Starborn alike, the final hope of humanity, had become its final curse. And as the stars burned bright above, Earth was left to wonder if they had truly been their own saviors, or simply the agents of their own destruction. The aftermath of the blast was a twisted, silent void in space. Earth's atmosphere burned from the shockwave, and the once proud fleet of humanity was reduced to wreckage, scattered like debris across the void of the stars. What had begun as humanity's last stand had instead become a tomb, a graveyard for soldiers, civilians, and the countless worlds now lost to the annihilation caused by their own desperation. On Earth, the sky had turned crimson, dark clouds of smoke and ash blotting out the sun. The Kralnar fleet, though diminished by the blast, still remained a formidable threat, their remaining warships moving in closer to finish what had been started. The Kralnar were a brutal race, relentless in their pursuit of dominance, and they had no mercy left to show. But amid the devastation, a spark of defiance still smoldered. Earth had been broken, yes, but not defeated. There were still those who had not surrendered to despair, those who would stand against the darkness even when the odds were stacked impossibly high. Admiral Varen stood among the remnants of his command center, his mind racing through the shattered possibilities. The Azra's weapon had done its job. Too well, it had taken down the Kralnar's largest ships, crippled their main forces, but the price had been catastrophic. Nearly every Starborn soldier had either fallen or been turned against humanity by the influence of the Azra's technology, and now Earth itself stood on the brink of collapse. But Varen had seen something in the chaos, a glimmer of hope. The surviving human forces, though small in number, were still alive, still fighting. They had retreated into the cities, into bunkers beneath the ground, and were now organizing for one last desperate defense. It was a long shot, but Varen was a soldier, and soldiers never surrendered. He rallied the remnants of Earth's military, uniting them in a plan to defend their home and retake the skies. The Kralnar were close, too close, and their ground forces would be landing soon. They needed a way to delay them, to buy enough time for the survivors to evacuate or to mount one last final strike. "We've lost so much," Varen said to his gathered commanders, his voice hoarse but resolute, "but we are still Earth, and we will never kneel. The Kralnar may have broken our fleet, they may have decimated our colonies, but they haven't taken our will. We fight not just for Earth, but for the future, for everything we have ever built, and we will not let it be erased." The commanders nodded, their faces hardened by grief, but burning with determination. They were humanity's last line of defense, and they would not go down quietly. Meanwhile, Juno's broken, battered body lay in the wreckage of the starborn assault mission. She had barely survived the cataclysm she had unleashed, her mind teetering on the brink of collapse. The influence of the Azra's power had left its mark on her. And now she was a shadow of the leader. She had once been the soldiers who had once followed her with unwavering loyalty, were either dead or lost to the madness of the ancient technology. But as Juno regained consciousness, a single fleeting thought emerged from the fog of her mind. She couldn't just die here. Not like this. She had failed. Yes, but she could still fight, still make amends for the destruction she had caused. Her fingers clenched into fists, and with the last of her strength, she pulled herself from the wreckage. The voices in her mind, those of the Azra, whispered, urging her to succumb to their will, to embrace the power that still thrummed in her veins. But she pushed them back, remembering what it meant to be human, what it meant to fight for a future worth living for. Juno stumbled across the ruined battlefield, finding the few surviving soldiers who had been part of her original team. They were broken, battered, but they still stood, ready to fight. "Captain," one of them whispered, his voice tinged with disbelief, "we thought you were gone." "I'm still here," Juno said, her voice raw but defiant, "and we're not done yet." Together, they made their way to the last remaining base of resistance. The Kralnar had not yet landed their full ground force, and the humans had one final chance to take the fight to them. The battle would be the last, a desperate struggle to push back the invaders and take back their world. Humanity's final stand had begun, and though the odds were impossibly stacked against them, they would fight to the very end, for their home, for their future, and for the survival of the stars themselves. The battlefield was a twisted labyrinth of ruins, remnants of humanity's once thriving cities, now reduced to rubble. The air was thick with smoke, and the distant sound of Kralnar war machines moving into position echoed across the broken landscape. But amidst the devastation, humanity's will had not been crushed, not yet. Juno, along with the few surviving members of her team, moved quickly through the chaos, rallying the scattered remnants of Earth's resistance fighters. The Kralnar had underestimated human resilience, and now they would pay the price for that mistake. The few remaining fighters, ordinary men and women who had once been civilians, had become warriors in the face of extinction. Their determination was an ironclad shield against the overwhelming darkness. "Hold the line," Juno said, her voice strong despite the exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. "We push back, or we die trying. If we fall, Earth falls. But we won't let that happen." Her words were a rallying cry, and the survivors, fueled by that spark of hope, moved with renewed purpose. They had no more ships, no more fleets, no advanced technology to rely on, but they had each other, and they had the sheer will to fight for their world. On the outskirts of the battlefield, Admiral Varen watched from the command center, overseeing the last pockets of resistance. He had gathered a ragtag force of soldiers, engineers, and civilians, those still capable of fighting or fleeing, preparing for one final desperate push against overwhelming odds. Earth's people had rallied together, determined to take back their home. But Varen knew this was more than just a battle for Earth. It was a fight for humanity's future, a fight to prove that they would never bow to a superior force, never become pawns in the galactic chess game that the Kralnar and the Azra had envisioned. The battle raged for hours. The Kralnar, relentless and merciless, pushed forward with unyielding force, their soldiers disembarking from their massive ships and laying waste to anything in their path. But Earth's resistance, though small, fought with a ferocity that no invader had ever expected. The few remaining weapons they had, mining explosives, makeshift energy shields, and salvaged Azra tech, became their instruments of survival. Juno and her team, having fought their way to the front lines, found themselves at the heart of the enemy's assault. The Kralnar had deployed their elite warriors, huge, armored giants who towered over the human soldiers, their weapons capable of tearing through metal and flesh alike. But Juno did not hesitate. She led her team in an all-out charge, rallying the troops with every ounce of strength. She had left the Azra's technology within her still thrummed, still whispered, but she had learned to silence it. Focusing only on the mission ahead, they would fight to the last breath to protect the future of humanity. In the chaos of battle, as the Kralnar advanced, something unexpected happened to the surviving starborn soldiers, still under the influence of the Azra's power, found clarity for the first time since the destruction of the fleet. The technology that had once threatened to break them now served as their final weapon. The starborn soldiers turned on the Kralnar, their enhancements giving them a new edge in combat. In a final, desperate move, Juno activated the last of the Azra's power. A single, immense burst of energy designed to decimate the Kralnar's ground forces. The blast shot up from the heart of Earth's resistance, tearing through the invaders' lines, obliterating their advanced machinery, and scattering their soldiers like dust in the wind. But even as the Kralnar fell, the cost was immense. The power that had once been a gift was now a double-edged sword, and Juno felt the pull of its darkness once again. Her body trembled from the strain. Her mind pushed to the brink of collapse. She had done what she set out to do, but the victory had come at a personal cost. As the dust settled, and the Kralnar forces began to retreat, Admiral Varen stepped forward. Watching the scene unfold, he had witnessed the final battle for Earth, and though their losses were immeasurable, humanity had won. They had not just survived. They had triumphed over the darkest forces in the galaxy. "We've done it," Varen said quietly, as he looked upon the survivors. "We've proven that humanity can fight, and humanity can win." Juno, her body battered and worn, stood beside him, looking out at the stars in the distance. The war was not over. The galaxy still had its dangers, but humanity had earned its place among the stars once more. And as the sun began to break through the smoky clouds over Earth, Juno whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Humanity had emerged from the fire of destruction, stronger than ever, and now they would forge their own future, one where they would never again be slaves to the will of others. The defenders of the stars had risen, and Earth had found its place in the universe once again.